Money, power, and sex. Is that what life's all about? Has anybody read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Okay, so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, very famous book, and it's all about the search being on for the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And of course, the conclusion of the great supercomputer that is in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy called the Earth, the conclusion is that they're going to find out that the meaning to life, the universe, and everything is a number. Anyone know the number? 42. 42. Even if you haven't read the book, you're bound to know that. And of course, it's a comedy. But it's a comedy with a real message behind it, a genuine question behind it. Because the author has spotted that everyone's asking that question, what's the meaning to life, the universe, and everything? What is life all about? Why do I bother? And for you guys in an exam term, as I know this is, there must be times, even at prestigious Bath, it is prestigious, I gather, so he tells me. There must be times when you kind of look at your work and you look at the revision and you look at all there is to do and you think, what is this about? Why am I bothering to do this stuff? Because actually I think it's a sort of question that all people are asking. So when you come up with a question, what is life about? Where do you look for answers to questions like that? People look at all sorts of ideas. Let me tell you one that you might have heard of. There's a very famous atheist and scientist called Richard Dawkins. Those of us that are true scientists maybe don't recognize him as a scientist, but that's a debating point. Okay. Anyway, maybe you do. Let me quote him. I think the quote is here. After sleeping through 100 million centuries, we finally opened our eyes on a sumptuous planet, sparkling with colour, bountiful with life. Within decades, we must close our eyes again. Isn't it a noble and enlightened way of spending our brief time in the sun to work at understanding the universe and how we've come to wake up in it? This is how I answer when I'm asked, as I am surprisingly often, well, I don't think surprisingly, why do I bother to get up in the mornings? So do you see that? Dawkins says what drives him to get up each day, in other words, the meaning for his life, is to find just the enjoyment of exploring, well, he wouldn't call it creation, of just exploring things around him. But he doesn't because actually he gets a kick out of it. He also gets quite a lot of kick out of having a go at people like me. But with the full understanding that it's all going to come to nothing anyway, because he knows one day he's going to die, so we may as well make the most of it. In fact, for Dawkins, therefore, essentially life is all about just, do what I can while I am here, because there's no meaning anyway. Let's just have a ball. And his way of having a ball is to do what he does with research and atheism. Which is, by the way, can I say, a kind of nihilistic idea in the 20th century laid the foundations of the Third Reich. But anyway, you might like to come back to me on that. But actually, for most people, I reckon, without much thought, they look at life a bit like that. After all, you grow up, you're born, you grow up, you get married or not, you have kids or not, you retire and you die. And what do those kids do? Well, they grow up, they get married or not, have kids or not, retire and die, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Or pull life down just a few minutes for a second, and you get up in the morning to go to work to buy the food to come home to eat. You guys aren't there yet, but you will be. You get up in the morning to go to work to buy the food to come home to eat. You get up in the morning to go to work to buy the food to come home to eat. Life is just one continuous cycle of that kind of thing. And while life is interspersed with holidays and big occasions and that kind of thing, the danger, if you stop and think about it, is that in the end it all seems a bit pointless. And people do come to that conclusion. It's all really very pointless, particularly when it's hard. And if you can't get up in the morning to go to work to buy the food to come home to eat, then it really seems pointless. Or if one of those stages I've just described, you want to have kids and you can't. Or you want to get married and you don't. Or your marriage goes wrong. And is really life just about those processes? Which actually doesn't make us, if it is, by the way, so very different from my dog Barney, who doesn't get married, but you can work out the rest. What do people do then? Actually, what happens is that they end up being ruled by their appetites because they don't know what else to do. Now, by appetite, I mean things that we long for, things that we desire. So we have an appetite for money, or let me call it stuff for a second. We have an appetite for power, that is influencing others on a big scale or a little scale. And of course, obviously, we have an appetite for sex. You don't need me to tell you that. But is that going to work? Is that really what life's about? Well, maybe the best way to find out whether that's what life's about is to try it. But there are risks with doing that, because if we go down that route and we find that it all leads nowhere, then it's a bit late, isn't it? So how about listening to someone else who has tried it? Well, a few minutes ago, we can lose that slide, Sam, actually. A few minutes ago, Ash gave us a reading from the Bible. It was one book deep in the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, called Ecclesiastes. Now, Ecclesiastes, if you have a Bible, if you don't have a Bible, get one. Because actually all intelligent people should have it. Everyone should have access to a Bible. Particularly educated people must have a Bible. It's influenced our culture so much. It'd be ridiculous not to have one. Well, you would. It's just one of those things to have on the shelf. Dictionary, Bible. That's why. Anyway. But you'll find that it's written by someone who refers to himself as the teacher. If you read around a little bit, then it's pretty easy to find out that actually it was written by. He likes the alias teacher, but really he's a king. And it's almost certainly King Solomon, who's quite famous in the Bible. Now, the book Ecclesiastes is all about testing the question of meaning. Let me tell you what the starting words are. This is the opening chapter almost. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor which he toils under the sun? He's tried to get up in the morning to go to work to buy the food thing, and he's just found it doesn't work. He's tried to get married to blah, blah, blah thing, and he can see it doesn't work. And he's a king with loads of power, and he's got all the options before him, so he has a go. This is a guy who's looked at life under the sun. Now, just note that phrase, really, because it's really important. Life under the sun, in other words, what you can see from the perspective that what you can see is all there is. It all seems a bit meaningless, a bit pointless, a bit like Dawkins. So he commits himself to having a go at finding meaning in everything, including actually in money and sex and power. So if we chuck up the beginning of chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, I'm not going to go through the whole book, chapter 2 verse 4, he says this. So I undertook, he says, great projects. I built houses for myself, and I planted vineyards, which, of course, in their day meant he took vast areas the size of Wiltshire. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flowering trees. Because he's a king, no one can argue with him. I bought male and female slaves, which we would say is awful, but this is how he tried it. I had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone else in Jerusalem for me, which is the center of his universe. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers. Great entertainment, like having wall-to-wall TV and a harem as well. You can work that one out. The delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward from my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and everything I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Just imagine having that kind of opportunity, can you? All that power, all that money, all that influence, and doing what you like. So much money that you can build what you like, where you like, when you like, how you like, and get people to do it for you. And that was Solomon. So much power that everyone is exactly what they're told with that question, because actually at a word from you, off can come their head, literally. And so much whatever, that having a harem is apparently okay. And in fact, if this guy, as suspected, is King Solomon, then the Bible tells us elsewhere that he actually had, get this, ladies and guys, 1,000 wives. A wife for every day of the year for 3 years, a different one. One is plenty. I love her desperately, but one is plenty. 1,000. He tries it all, And he concludes it's just pointless. Absolutely pointless. Now, I don't know about you, what he's just described sounds to me like modern society really well. But it's not modern. This is 3,000 years ago he's trying this. And hang on. You may say to me, you and I may never imagine living life like that, but having money, well, it isn't meaningless. You do need money to do stuff, don't you? And money to survive. And the answer, of course, is yes, of course you do. Money's not bad in itself. And having power, at least some influence, isn't meaningless if you use it correctly. Great good can be done with power, which of course is exactly what the political parties are trying to persuade us of right now in the run-up to the 7th of May in the election. They're trying to say, give me the power and I'll do the best for you. Or give me the power and I'll do the best for education or for the NHS or for universities and raising grants, lowering tuition fees, all that kind of stuff. Or not when they get in, depending on your perspective. And sex, well, none of us would say sex is meaningless, would we? I don't think. And actually it was invented by God, and quite frankly it's great. And it is great. In fact, were you at the Bible book of Ecclesiastes and you turned the page into the next book, you'd find that the next book in the Bible is called the Song of Songs. And the Song of Songs is, well, frankly, it's all about sex. It's really racy stuff. In fact, so much is it about sex that I am told, I haven't been able to check this, I'm told that a Jewish man wasn't supposed to read it until he was 30 because of the effect that it would have on him. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but you get the idea. It's really, sex is God's idea. It's a good thing. But Solomon's point is this. If your priority is money, if that's what you live for, or if your priority is power, or if your priority is sex, then although they may just seem to be fantastic right now, one day you're going to have to leave them all behind. And the problem in the end with letting your appetites rule is that appetites tend to dominate, and instead of them serving us, we end up serving them. Let me demonstrate it to you. Have you ever noticed that? You see, the book of Ecclesiastes goes on to describe some of this, but let me put it this way. I guess right now you've got more access to money than most of you had. Well, first years I'm talking. You've got more access to money than you ever had before. Is that fair? Suddenly you find your bank account has got, from wherever it comes from, or even a loan, thousands of pounds in it. Why have you got all that money? I'll tell you. Because your need for it has grown as well. And what you will find is that you never have enough. So you can find more to use. Even if you do have enough to do what the things you think are priorities now, you'll find that you need more. Over the years, I've got to tell you, I have met in work and elsewhere, I have met people who are extraordinarily wealthy, just extraordinarily wealthy. And what I notice is that accumulating wealth for them has become an end in itself. And you see, the reason for that is because although money seems to bring security, there's always someone else who has more. And there's always a risk that you might lose what you've got, be it through a bank crash or a stock market crash or something like that. And power is the same. Have you ever noticed how it is that powerful people are quickly forgotten? I'm 45 and I've now lived through, I tried to work it out, I think it's 7 prime ministers. Most of you wouldn't have heard of most of the early ones. Why? Well, because though they had power at the time, they just get moved on. And when they finished in office, you know what happened? Some of the legacy they left, a few people liked, most people hated, and everybody wanted to do something fresh. Yeah, listen to the political parties right now. They're all vying for power from us. Why do they want more power? But to make all the difference. The problem is, I remember them saying that 5 years ago. To make all the difference. I remember them saying that 5 years before that. To make all the difference. You'd think that there was enough difference made now, wouldn't you? But it's not how it works. And sex, well, it is great. But the pleasure only lasts for a short time. And the bottom line is, one day we'll all be too old. That's just true. And if you've lived for sex, then you're going to end your days in great frustration. And actually, if you live to be attractive for sex, then you will always feel inadequate. So the guys will never have big enough muscles because there's always somebody, you know what it's like, there's always somebody in the gym who's bigger than you, always. And girls, if you're living to make yourselves attractive for the guys, I'll tell you what, you will always feel insecure if that's your highest priority, because there's always somebody else more attractive around. Always. Partly because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And the worst part of both the muscles and the beauty is it's a downhill trajectory from here. You're all about 20. Do you know what? By the time you get to 30, you're going to be wishing you were 20. By the time you were 40, you're going to be wishing... Do you see what I mean? It's a downhill trajectory, which is why all these women have their faces pulled back, and you get, you know, and all this, and the guys that... well... Do you know, at the start of his life, Elvis Presley, the so-called king of rock and roll, told a reporter that his goals were to be rich and famous and happy. Now, I just about remember, many years ago, I was very young, but I just about remember when Elvis Presley died. And a few months before he died, he was speaking to the same reporter at the end of his career. And the reporter said to him, so have you made it to rich and famous and happy? You know, just before he died, it was said that he could have wallpapered Gracelands, his home in America, with $100 bills and not noticed it was missing from his bank account. The whole mansion could have been wallpapered with $100 bills and he wouldn't have noticed. Famous, it was said that he was more famous than the presidents of the United States. And that's easy to spot, isn't it? Because most of you can only remember maybe one or two, if you can remember that many. But everybody's heard of Elvis Presley. But happy, do you know what his answer was to be happy? He said to the reporter, I'm as lonely as hell. And that's sad. Spent his whole life investing in those things, and he discovered exactly what the teacher in Ecclesiastes found. And the passage that was read at the beginning a minute ago sums it all up really well. Remember your Creator, it says, in the days of your youth, before the day of trouble come and the years approach, when you're going to say, I'm going to find no pleasure in them. Why? Because one day, actually, your eyes will fade and your muscles will grow weak. Look at verse 2. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after rain, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop. They were once strong and now they're stooping. When the grinders cease because they're few and those looking through the windows grow dim. And when hearing goes, verse 4, when the doors of the streets are closed and the sound of groaning fades, meaning I can't hear anymore. When rise up at the sound of birds, but all the songs grow faint. What was that? Pardon, dear? When confidence fails, and so does libido. Look at verse 5. When men are afraid of heights. I remember being in my early 20s and feeling indestructible. But you know, that goes when you get responsibility. And one day when we're old, and I'll get there before you do, there'll be a time when men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets. Oh, I can't go there, it's too dark. Someone might mug me. Well, that's true now, but when you're old, lots of old people I know, that's true. This is a polite way of putting the decline of sex. When almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags himself along and desire no longer is stirred. I won't fill in that, you can work it out. And then death comes. Look, verse 5. When the man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about the streets, work it out. Remember him, says the writer, before the silver cord is severed, before you're no longer, or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel is broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground. What are we made of? From whence it came, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Remember God now, he says, because none of those things that you try are going to work in the end if that's what you live for. So what's the answer? Is there an answer to the bleak picture? Actually, the answer is yes. And the answer is very simply this, because under the sun, remember I said that, watch out for that, it's not the only perspective. That's the truth. Here and now is not all there is. What we see is not all there is for which we can live our lives. And thank God that's true, because most people in the world don't have access much to money or to power, and the truth about living for sex is really very quickly rather obvious to people who try that. So the book of Ecclesiastes finds the same answer, which is why it tells us to remember our Creator. And if we can see all there is, and Dawkins is right, then you may as well just do what you can with what you have. And it's just tough. But if the Bible is right, and there is a God, then living life Well, in fact, not just with reference to him, but knowing him, in relationship with him, living life with him as the understanding that he's the creator to whom you must give account and relate and enjoy, which, believe it or not, is what Christians do, actually in relationship with him provides an entirely different perspective. We're not here because of some cosmic accident, we're here with a purpose. And that's the great news, actually. It's the good news, which Christians call gospel. Gospel means good news, is that in the person of Jesus Christ, God has stepped into our apparently meaningless existence to bring us back into relationship with him. He's stepped into being a human being to try, to smell, to feel, to know, and to show. But more than that, as he spoke in John's Gospel about bringing people back to know God, he said these amazing words. He said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now, if you're not a Christian tonight, you might say, reflect the Christians I know, they all seem to be boring, stuck-ups who just aren't interested in living. But depends how you define living. It does. So a Christian's perspective, for example, can I say on exams, is that yes, we must work hard and use the gifts God's given us. But the good news, as a Christian, I can say life does not depend on my performance in exams. My career might, sure. But I'm not just living for career. Whether or not I become wealthy and famous and powerful might, but we've just demonstrated that's not all there is. Now, I'm not saying exams aren't important, of course they are, but it does just change your perspective. And you see, as he died on a cross, taking the punishment for those times when we have lived for ourselves, what the Bible calls sin, our rebellion against him, Jesus made this amazing declaration. As he hung on the cross, having taken the punishment, he said at the end, he said, it is finished. Meaning, literally the words mean, done it. I have achieved everything necessary to bring people back into relationship with God. For a Christian it means, for me as a Christian it means, for all Christians it means that God has made it possible for us to be back in relationship with him through Jesus buying that and not us doing it ourselves. That's amazing. So I'm not a Christian because I'm a good guy. I'm a Christian because I know I need a Savior. And finally, having risen again from the dead, proving that death itself had been beaten and this horror of meaninglessness is over, there is a real living hope for the future. He told his disciples to go and be his witnesses in the whole world. And of course they did that, and they're still doing that, which is what this evening is all about. And those of us who are Christians have found that well, let me describe it, that real forgiveness, that real meaning, that real hope, that real longing, that real joy to carry us through life and beyond, real hope, by admitting that we failed, knowing that we've lived for ourselves, and said to God, I'm really sorry that I've lived that way. Please will you forgive me? Thank you that Jesus was punished instead of me. Please will you change me? I want to repent, literally, I want to turn from going my way and going your way, and yeah, it might mean that I end up as a missionary, but more likely it just means I'm going to end up being just a hard-working engineer somewhere, or whatever it is you do. But most of the point, I'm going to do it in relationship with you for now and for the rest of my life and beyond into eternity. Let me put it this way, just as I close. Towards the end of the New Testament, towards the end of the Bible, one of Jesus' disciples wrote these amazing words to Christians who were being really hammered for being Christians. And it's these. His name's Peter, you might have heard of him. He wrote to them, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth." Heard of this thing about being born again? It literally means being changed, the way I've just described. New birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And into an inheritance that can never perish or spoil or fade, that is kept in heaven for you. Let me tell you, if you're not a Christian this evening, then the great news is that you can share that hope. You can. You can share the forgiveness of God. You can share in that relationship with God, and you can share that real meaning and hope for the future that Jesus came to bring.